All right, man. All right, thanks everyone for joining. This is the Future Proof Podcast. My name is Alex Mysinek. I'm the host. I'm joined here with Ken Fee from BTA. He's going to just talk about his company a little bit, and we'll go into the podcast. Thanks, Ken.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me on. As you said, I'm with BTA. That stands for Business Technology Architects. Pretty much reflects what we do. We focus on solving business problems and then applying technology. And when you do that, you have to bring an architecture to the table, or you end up painting yourself into a corner. So we try to design things for the long term that meet the short term needs, but also allow you to scale as you go forward. Our areas of focus are really enterprise infrastructure, whether it's campus networking, data center networking, and how do you secure that entire enterprise.
I mean, it looks like you guys got four pillars that you really stand by, like protect, detect, optimize, and observe. Can you kind of go into why that's so important for your company?
Yeah, we've iterated over the years our process, but those really speak to what we do. Right now, zero trust is a big focus area for us. And when I say zero trust, I'm really talking about the east-west microsegmentation component of zero trust. That's a really hard problem to solve, and a lot of people haven't done it because it's hard. You have to collect lots of data, you have to correlate things, you have to figure out what the right policies are. And so that protect piece, those applications that you're protecting in the data center, that's kind of your last line of defense from all the other security controls that get put in place as part of a zero trust enterprise architecture. The detect piece is, understanding what's going on, knowing where you're, being able to monitor things effectively and respond. And the optimize piece, that's just the ongoing, how do you deliver a great experience for your application consumers, whether they're internal consumers or customers that are coming in and interacting with your site, your products, your services, trying to deliver applications in the most secure manner that we can. Observe, yeah, observability. It's, that's looking at those, I look at optimize and observability almost sometimes as the same thing. They're similar but different, but the observability piece is delivering that application experience.
I wanted to touch on disturbing trends in kind of like the data privacy. So we're seeing more like, high profile breaches, shadow IT, and third party access concerns around your industry. From BTA's perspective, what are some of the most alarming trends that you're noticing in corporate data privacy?
I'm constantly amazed at how immature some of the processes are with a number of different customers, a number of different verticals. My brother works in a large bank in IT, and we were actually talking about this last night about, there's still that social engineering component that people are, look at the hacks with the casinos last year. Those were social engineering attacks that took those guys down. I would imagine it was hundreds of millions of dollars kind of impact, because there wasn't the process in place to prevent somebody from impersonating somebody. The simple, and one of the things that we talked about was, it's pretty simple. When I call Apple to open a case on something, they send me a push notification saying, here's a number, I need you to read this back to the person. But IT organizations don't always do that level of verification. If you can provide enough personal information about yourself or about the person you're trying to impersonate, you can work your way through that. And so people are still the most vulnerable part in the IT infrastructure chain. And so what do you do to mitigate that potential, whether it's a unwitting or a witting, attacker introducing something into an environment? Is you've got to go protect those applications and that data. And like I said before, it's that last frontier, that east-west microsegmentation, being very specific and discrete about what can talk to what and where it can talk to that, whether it's host to host or host to internet. Just being able to observe and optimize those things is critical to your infrastructure. We put all kinds of data protection tools in place and data loss prevention tools in place. But if somebody has the right credentials and gains access to a particular set of data, and then they start to move that data out of your infrastructure through an SSL tunnel of some kind to a destination that it shouldn't be going to, you need to be able to detect that. And that's where being able to have, that kind of host level firewall access and managing host level firewalls at scale when you've got thousands or tens of thousands of hosts gets to be one of these problems that everybody kind of throws their hands up and says, I don't know how I can do this at scale. It just, that's That's the biggest problem out there. And so, we work with customers to take that scary process and make it less scary. It's kind of like, everybody's heard the, how do you eat an elephant? You do it one bite at a time. How do you get to zero trust? You do it one bite at a time. And you want to use tools, you want to use automation, but in the end, a person has to make a security policy decision about what is and isn't allowed. And that's not just talk to a firewall person. Firewall person knows what's written in a policy and they go write a policy to implement it. But the compliance person may have a different perspective on that. We had a customer, it was an insurance company. We were doing a zero trust east-west microsegmentation project for them. These things typically start out with a network team and a firewall or security team, and you're working with those individuals, and they're like, well, we just need to protect the production environment. And we're like, well, what about QA? What about dev? What about pre-prod? And they're like, well, those aren't as important as prod. And then we start our process with these people and we go down a path and we say, okay, well, where's the security policy people? Get them in the room. Where's the compliance people? Get them in the room. Let's have a conversation about what this looks like. And it's not a technical problem. It's a business problem. It's a business risk assessment. A technology person's assessment of business risk is going to be different than, say, a CFO or a risk management, chief risk management officer's perspective on risk. So policy people came in the room. They said, hey, how come we're not deploying these agents on all of our environment? They're like, oh, well, we don't need to. We don't want to buy that many agents. He's like, and the first thing came out of his mouth, you realize we're using copies of our production database in dev. And they all looked somewhat dumbfounded. So they went from covering 400 servers to covering almost 2,000 servers because their risk was that distributed. And so there's a mindset change that needs to happen in how you approach security. You need to be able to develop securely, but just making sure that those hosts are protected so that they don't get compromised by some zero-day vulnerability that somebody decided to drop a patch in dev that opens them up to something. Being able to monitor those CVEs in real time, that's probably my biggest, I'm always a little bit amazed at what goes on with that.
Well, and it's so important to their reputation and the business.
We could talk, for hours about the various quote unquote major hacks that have happened in the last, just in the last 24 months. But, this is not a new problem. It's been going on for a while. It's just now with AI, it's easier to attack. Probably that next great frontier is, we're going to deploy AI data centers, and we're going to be sucking up all kinds of corporate data into these data lakes, and we're going to let AI do analysis and all this other stuff on them. How are you guaranteeing that the AI is not leaking that data to the internet? Are you using open source? Are you using DeepSeek? Are you going to OpenAI? Are you using Azure? Are you using AWS? It's, we do a lot of work with Cisco, and they've got a huge focus right now on AI security. And we feel like we're pretty far down a path there because AI security is really, it's application security because AI is an application. And so you've got to treat it like, the valuable data that it is.
Talking about AI in security and the importance of making sure that you're covering all your bases and thinking of things like that. But you guys also do lean heavily into utilizing AI and MLs and power tools like Architect Explorer. How do these tools help you now combat that or help your clients?
Yeah, so machine learning is key. So, a lot of our zero microsegmentation engagements are around Cisco Secure Workload, which is a very early machine learning tool. It does a great job of capturing all that data traffic. I read a phenomenal article on LinkedIn last month before I went on vacation, so I've forgotten the name of the person who wrote it, but they talked about where you have to get all this data. You have to get it from flow data. You have to get it from all the sources where you can gather flow data because it's critical to have that data. But then machine learning will take you so far and it's only so smart. And so with Architect Explorer, what we've built is a platform. We try to normalize security policy. The goal is, okay, I've got a Cisco data center switch. I've got a Palo Alto firewall. I might have a Cisco firewall. I might have something else. I might have a Juniper fabric, or I've got all these things, and they express policies different ways, or they configure policies different ways. And then I've also got load balancers in the mix. How do I look across the enterprise and make sure that I have a normalized set of security policies based on whatever platforms I'm using? And oh, by the way, how do I break that policy down so I'm not dropping a 10,000 line ACL every place along the way? I drop a much smaller subset of policy where it needs to be deployed. And so what Architect Explorer does for us is we collect data from systems of record, whether it's secure workloads. We can ingest all that. We normalize that data, and then we produce working documents that we can go with a customer, and they don't have to learn all these platforms. They just have to be able to review a set of policies that we deliver to them in, and some people say, oh my God, but we deliver it to them in spreadsheet form because everybody can work in a spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet allows us, we've done a lot of really cool things with how we organize that data. But then once they approve that, we take that, we upload it back into the platform, and then the platform can go push policy out to the policy enforcement points, because that's what we really are looking at. And, what we've been able to do with our platform to this point is we feel like we take about 80% of the man hours to get to a really highly effective zero trust policy for applications. But that includes network people, firewall people, policy people, risk management people. They all get their say in this. And we use tools to simulate, if we enforce this policy, what do we do? Once you've simulated it and tested it, then you can go and do that enforcement with a high degree of confidence that you're not going to break the application. There's still that people needing to put eyes on things component that will always be there. But in the future, we're going to, we built what we call essentially this policy repository that then we can now, we've got a number of years of data that we've collected and working with hundreds of customers on segmenting applications. We've built a lot of intellectual property around, okay, well, this application looks like this application looks like that. Everybody's a little bit different in, what their external connectivity looks like, but we can probably get 80-90% of the way there with data that we've collected already. And now we're going to use AI, and we're going to do it in a private model. We're not putting it out on a public cloud. It's going to be, this is very, very sensitive information about how people are securing their infrastructure. So then we're going to be using AI to even further try to reduce that people cycle time so that we can get to a much more optimized policy. It's typically a 2 or 3 iteration kind of thing with people reviewing things, testing them, reviewing them, testing them. Now we're hoping to, reduce that cycle time. And that's really where, a lot of our software development focus has been. Is we used to develop software to make our consultants more efficient. Now we develop software not only to make them more efficient, but to make our customers more efficient, and that we don't have to always be the ones there doing the work, because this is something that all organizations really need to do. If they have any kind of PII, sensitive financial information, think about law firms. They're big targets. It's not that they're generating all this data, but they have their customers' data because of whether it's patent information or litigation, discovery. Our biggest customers are law firms, insurance companies, healthcare, and banks, financial services institutions, right?
What do you do on a daily basis at CEO, your position? What does Ken focus on? What's your favorite part of your job? What gets you up in the morning?
My favorite part of my job is talking to customers. It's always good to talk to customers and understand where their business challenges lie and to see how we can help them solve those problems. My job is to be thinking about what's next. What are the next areas, or what are the next set of features that we need to be building into our platforms? But it's the reason you build those things is to go talk to customers, and you can't build those if you don't talk to your customers and understand what their use cases are. That's my primary focus. Obviously, help with our sales team. I've got a VP of sales, but I don't want to just be the sales guy. I really enjoy the technology. My background, I was a geek. I was a Microsoft certified systems engineer way back in the early 2000s. I became a CCIE, done a lot of really interesting network infrastructure, security infrastructure projects with global customers. Worked at Cisco for a number of years. So, I come from a very technical background, but I'm not the guy on the keyboard anymore. But I can have a really intelligent conversation with the people that are driving the keyboards and help them relate the technology piece to the business piece that really is what's driving these.
All right. Thank you so much. So if someone wants to, business wants to get in touch with you, use your services, how do they find you? What's the best way to get in touch with you guys?
You can go to our website. It's gobta.com, gobta.com. And there's a contact us button there. My email is kfee@gobta.com. You can email me there. I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, X is, I think I'm Ken Fee. I think it's 42 on Twitter. I'm all over. I'm not hard to find on social media or on LinkedIn. I'm pretty easy. But, we'd love to engage with people. And it's, I love talking to customers because Everybody's different, you know, and what's similar, what's kind of interesting is I have this conversation. Everybody's like, well, what verticals do you focus on? Well, we can work with anybody because most IT is 85 to 90% the same, and it's 10 to 15% vocabulary. You got to learn the medical terminology, you got to learn the finance things. And, we've worked across numerous industries. I talked about, kind of the big four right now for us, but we've also worked in retail. We've worked in manufacturing. We've worked in utilities. Again, our focus is to deliver phenomenal customer outcomes. We have, we're not necessarily, we are there to help customers solve business problems with the technology they have or the technology they're about to select. We've been a pure consulting shop since we started. Now we're selling our own software, but that's been our go-to-market, is to be the consultant, not the product reseller.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks, Alex. I really appreciate the time. It's been
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Thanks.
Bye.